Trek Profiles Podcast, episode 66, recorded May 2022. This is the Trek Profiles Podcast, where each episode we interview a Star Trek fan. We learn their fandom story, and we try to figure out why people love this show so much. I'm John, your intrepid host of this whole enterprise, and I welcome you to this, the Trek Profiles Podcast, episode 66. If you wish to get in touch with us, you can reach us at feedback@trekprofiles.com or on Facebook or Twitter @TrekProfiles. Spoiler warning, as we recorded this, the first few episodes of Strange New Worlds were released, so all previous Trek content up to and including that point is fair game and may be discussed during this episode. You have been warned, Human. As always, my trusty sidekick and co-host is the happily heuristic, habitually helpful, but never haphazard M5 Multitronic unit. Say hi, M5.
M5 available in at full power.
M5, show me the announcements.
Announcements posted.
The Trek Profiles Podcast is an independent show. If you'd like to support us, the best way to do that is just to follow us wherever you get your audio. We're on all the major platforms, and your following us helps other Trek fans find us. Another way how you could show your support is to make a donation in any amount to our official charity here on the show. That's the Children's Fund for Glycogen Storage Disease. A donation in any amount helps, as they are doing research to cure this terrible genetic condition. I talked about why we chose this charity and sort of my experience with it on episode 34 of the show. So if you're able, and if you'd like, please head on over to trekprofiles.com/donate, and you'll see a link there to give directly to the charity. I'll also put a link in the show notes. Thank you so much. There are some lightly edited outtakes and bonus material at the end of this episode. They will come after the ending audio cards, and the first one is a special little treat, a little aperitif before the rest of the bonus material. So enjoy them, or not, as you choose. Let's review the Kobayashi Maru Lightning Round polls from episode 63. In that one, my guest was Ron Roble, and as is my custom, I sent out the Kobayashi Maru Lightning Round questions as polls after the episode dropped on Twitter, so let's see how Ron did. Question 1. Which quadrant has the better vacation spots, Gamma or Delta? Both Ron and the audience were dead set on having days off in the Delta quadrant, and the decision was 73 to 27% for Delta. Question 2. Phasers on stun or phasers on disintegrate? Stun won the selected contest by a sizable sum of 77 to 23%, and that was also the selection of my guest. Question 3. You're going back in time. Which of these would be worse, the eugenics wars or the Bell riots? Ron elected the eugenics option, and the Twitter tweet settled on that as well by 86 to 14%. Question 4. Choose your Captain Kirk wisdom. No blah 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 or what does God need with a starship? The blathering of blah 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 was abandoned by both my guest and the bulk of the body politic online, with the starship choice boldly blowing out the rest by 74 to 26%. And finally, question 5. Who is going to write your biographical holonovel? Barclay or the EMH? Ron preferred Barclay, but my fandom followers felt conflicted, and no favorite was found, as it was a 50-50 result. Now, if you enjoyed those questions and would like to take a stab at writing your own for possible inclusion in the show, send them to me at feedback@trekprofiles.com or DM me on Twitter. Okay, I got one little piece of errata for you in this episode. It's actually from the bonus material. We had a little bit of a discussion about Stargate, and I could not remember the name of Richard Dean Anderson in the moment, so I regret my faulty memory. Please don't send the Goa'uld after me. All right, that's it for announcements. Let's get to it. M5, roll it.
Working.
His favorite captain is that most Jean-Luc of all the Picards. His favorite alien is Master Strategist Kolrami. Watch out for the stratagema. And his favorite ship is the USS Voyager. He's from Orange County, California, North America, Earth, in Sector 001. It's the software engineer, security analyst, and podcaster, Steve Gibson. Welcome, Steve, and thanks for being on the podcast.
Thanks very much, John. I'm delighted to be here with you.
Right on, right on. Okay, well, the M5 is a harsh taskmaster, and he demands that I ask question one, which is, Steve Gibson, are you a Star Trek fan?
I am absolutely dyed-in-the-wool Star Trek fan.
Now, you had mentioned your age. You brought it up. So I would not have delicately gone there, but you might be of an age, Steve, where you could have possibly seen Star Trek TOS in original broadcast. Was that in fact the case, or did you come to it later?
Today I'm 67. I was born in 1955, and I was the greatest heartbreak to me was that we only got 3 seasons of the first, the original Star Trek. But I was, it was must-see TV. I watched it live. I put up with commercial breaks, and I mean, it was fantastic television.
Do you recall how you first heard of it before it came on the air? Or was it just probably coming attractions or previews or something, or TV Guide?
Yeah. What I remember in the earliest days was, I guess there was the Twilight Zone. Sometimes we had sort of a sci-fi sort of theme on the Twilight Zone, certainly Lost in Space. I remember my sister and I would hide our heads in pillows because at our young age, we were terrified when the salad monster would come out from behind and, the robot was waving its arms, Danger Will Robinson and all that. So, and then there was, Forbidden Planet. I mean, there were just very few early sci-fi, but I mean, I wanted all I could get. And so I'm 100% sure that I knew when Star Trek was happening for the first time.
And so you were there in September 1966 watching the premiere episode.
Indeed, at age 11.
Fantastic. And so, of course, there was the 3 years of TOS, and then we had sort of the dark time. We didn't have any Star Trek. Then we had the animated series. Did you watch that when it was on in the 70s?
No, I never, even now, never have I seen any of the animated series. To me, part of the power and the value of Star Trek is that it's real people. At one point, when my company was at its full size and my birthday was approaching, they figured out what they wanted to do for me. And knowing what a Star Trek hound I am, my director of marketing pretended to be my agent and contacted the Next Generation offices and got the writer's kit for the Next Generation as a birthday present for me.
Nice.
And, the idea being, I was writing a column at the time. I had some writer chops. And so she was able to say, Steve wants to write some episodes of the Next Generation. I never did, never tried. But I did read the writer's kit. And the thing that stuck out in my mind the most is that in explaining to would-be writers what they were looking for episode content, they said, Star Trek is, it has phasers and it has warp drive and it has people beaming around, but that's not what it's about. It's about people. It's about relationships. It's about, the idea of humanity in the stars and the things that happen. And yes, to tell your story, you'll use the various things that we've created for you, phasers and beaming and warp drive and things. But, what we're looking for is human drama set there, not, oh, look, if you turn your phasers up higher, they'll, blah, blah, blah. I mean, that's not what it's about, except as a means of telling the larger story about people among the stars. And I thought that was really interesting. And of course, and that is, I think it's, for me, why Jean-Luc was the ultimate captain. To me, he embodied that starry, pardon the expression, starry-eyed idealism. Right. It was the sort of the clean set. It wasn't grubby. Everybody, whenever he would stand up, he would pull his tunic down tight. I mean, just to look proper. And of course, I've seen all the series, although I have to confess that I actually, the Deep Space Nine lost me. After several years of it, all of the battle stuff with where I don't even know some of the terms
The Dominion.
Yeah, the Dominion. Yes, I it's probably the fact that I was busy doing other things because I'm a coder. That can easily take over my life. When I remodeled my home, I added the blackout drapes in the bedroom because I'm often coding and the sun is coming up and it's like, oh crap, it's I lost the night, and so when I'm going to sleep it's noon, and so as a consequence, it can be that I'm just not making time for that, and I've thought about going back.
I want to let you know that Deep Space Nine has some fans who are quite ardent and passionate, and they have now all turned off the podcast, Steve. So thank you. I'm going to give you a hard time. So wait a minute. I want to keep the chronology, though. So tell me what was going through Steve's mind in the mid-'80s when they announced Star Trek was coming back to TV, and it wasn't going to be Kirk, Spock, and McCoy. It was going to be some new guys. Do you have any recollection of what your opinion was on that?
I would guess that I was so starved that I didn't care. If they didn't screw it up too badly, then just give me anything,
mm-hmm.
and I'm happy. Unfortunately, they gave me Q, which did not ever sit well with me.
And there goes the other half of my listeners. So Q has he's a big fan favorite, Steve. So you're going to have to explain yourself why you are particularly upset with Q. What's going on here?
Part of the joy of Star Trek is
mm-hmm.
solving problems. It's here's a problem that we've got, and how are we going to use the personnel we have, the technology we have, the things we know? The whole point is working with boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
In art, an artist who chooses a medium has to work within that medium to express themselves. Q is the ultimate wild card. He is the infinite get out of jail free card. I just saw it last night in the final episode of Picard season 2, where he did some things that just reversed a whole bunch of other stuff that had happened. And it was like, it's just not fair. It's cheating. He's the ultimate cheat. And the fly in the ointment, this whole, judging humanity nonsense, I just didn't ever go for any of that. So I feel about him the way Picard felt. Did not like him at all, hated him. He was an absolute annoyance. And that's how I felt too.
So in Q's defense, I will say that very often he's not the get out of jail free card. He actually puts them into jail. And even in cases where he offers them a way out or a shortcut, they don't want to take it. I'm thinking particularly of two examples right off the top of my head, turning Data into a real person and offering the Voyager a shortcut home in Star Trek Voyager, one of his appearances there. They didn't take him up on it.
Well, because often these things don't come at no cost. It's like, what do we have to do, Q, in order for you to snap your fingers and solve a huge... it's just... everything about it infuriates me. It's all wrong.
I see you have strong feelings here. All right, So we shan't dwell too much on the Q aspect, but I do want to keep in the timeline. So TNG comes out, and then TNG rolls right into Deep Space Nine, which you started watching and then gave up on at some point. Do I have that right?
Well, okay. There was Voyager, and of course, then there was also the out of left field. We got Star Wars, and I'm not sure where Star Wars was in that chronology, but of course that's one of the questions that people are often asked is, and really annoyingly are those people who don't know the difference. It's like, oh my God, really? So there is this like, are you Star Wars or are you Star Trek?
That's a dichotomy that makes no sense to me. It's like saying, I don't like Star Wars because I prefer apple pie. It's like, it's just a complete non sequitur to me. I don't understand it. You can like one, you can like the other, you can like them both, you can hate them both. I don't understand this Venn diagram, the exclusivity of the Venn diagram. It makes no sense to me. And I've had people on the show who are like, well, we were a Star Wars family. So what? You can like both. It's literally been bizarre to me.
I clearly remember going to the theater. It would have been what?
77?
77. Because I remember where I was at the time. It was in Palo Alto. Went to the theater. I mean, this came out of nowhere. We were stunned, And again, it's space. It's got stars. It's got stuff happening. And there's laser beam stuff. And it's like, what's not to love? But, on the other hand, it was in limited supply. And probably the best thing about The Next Generation was that we had 7 seasons, and they were old school, long half-a-year seasons. So they were real seasons, not the new cheaty, 10 and teaser. It's like, wait a minute, we just got going and it's over?
So, but I still am unclear. Have you seen all of Deep Space Nine?
Oh, yeah. All of Deep Space Nine. And in fact, I don't think my wife she loves science fiction, loves Star Trek, has seen The Next Generation a number of times. We just finished. It was with her that I was finishing up 2nd season of Picard last night. I don't think she ever saw any of Voyager. So I am looking forward to taking her through Voyager. Janeway at Chakotay, and I wasn't a huge fan. It was fun to have Jerry Ryan running around, because who doesn't like Jerry Ryan running around? But the Doctor was fun. But again, Next Generation, definitely my fave.
You have seen Voyager yourself, though.
Yes,
all of it.
Yes.
Okay. And so we've acknowledged now that you've seen like most TOS, all the Berman era. You're watching the new stuff, but the only thing you haven't seen is the animated series as we sit here today. Is that right?
Correct. And then what did they call the one with what's his face from Quantum Leap?
Enterprise.
Enterprise, yeah. And of course I saw all those too.
Okay. So I just wanted to get the parameters of what you've seen. So you're watching.
It was only Deep Space Nine. I don't know. Maybe it was an overload of Ferengi. I didn't need that much Ferengi.
All right, good. So tell me something. You started watching Star Trek as a kid, and I understand the M5 has given me some intelligence that long before you were possibly considering writing for the show, you actually dabbled in some Star Trek creations of your own. What is the M5 referring to?
Okay, well, so I was not alone being in love with Star Trek and Next Generation. And so my buddies and I in high school made our own feature-length Star Trek movie. And this was in the days of the Super 8mm film cameras. Their video was around, but it was still, the expensive 1-inch decks with the big reels. Because one of the things that we did was, because we were the geeks of the high school, was like, set up the AV stuff for a teacher.
You were in the AV club, Steve?
That kind of thing, yeah.
I was too.
Actually, it was, in my case, it was actually MRC, the Math Resource Center, was where I hung out. But it was, I well pegged as a geek back before there was any sense of that being like a good thing. So we had phasers and beaming and warp drive, and we had an audio track with the bad guys, the evil aliens. Scott Wilson was my best friend and was sort of he was the person who drove this effort. His sister had a huge stuffed bunny rabbit collection. And so the aliens were, of course, the Bunons.
Okay.
And we used single frame. The camera that we had would do single frame, so we used single frame stop action in order to animate the Bunons as they came down the hall to attack. And probably the best innovation was we needed, because this had a soundtrack, we needed to have the Bunon ship on screen. We had a view screen, we had consoles with flashing lights, but we needed to be hailed by the Bunon commander and threatened.
Of course.
What we needed him to say is, "We are the Bunons, surrender your ship or be destroyed." But it had to sound alien. So I came up with this idea of, because back then we still had reel-to-reel tape.
Right.
So we recorded that forward, reversed the tape, and played it backwards. Then we memorized how it sounded backwards. Then we said it to our best ability backwards, and then reversed that again so that it would kind of come out forwards, but not right. Now, I can tell you, however many years later that was, that if you take "We are the Bunons, surrender your ship or be destroyed," backwards that sounds like "Yosha Bedidro, Pashroyer Neros, Snana Banani."
And you remember this.
So if you say "Yosha Bedidro, Pashroyer Neros, Snana Banani," and reverse that, it sounds like "We are the Bunons, surrender your ship or be destroyed."
And where is this movie today? And can I post a link to it?
We have on a number of occasions berated ourselves for having lost it. We don't remember who had it, because it was very popular for a while. So it was going from one household to the next, and parties would play it and so forth. And so, for example, Scott had a range top, which was, but this again back in the 70s, it was 4 sets of white buttons, where each of the different white buttons was a different temperature of the coils. And so we would, in order to do the transporting, the camera would switch to a close-up of somebody pressing a lot of these white buttons in sequence, and then like moving their hand upwards. Then we switched to a group of us standing under the chandelier, motionless for a while, and the camera was on a tripod, so so we were all not moving, and then we'd stop the camera, everyone would get out of the way, run the camera again. So we were all there for a while, then suddenly we disappeared, and then that was the scene. Once we had the film processed, we found that location, that frame, where on one frame we were there, and the next frame we were not. And then using a pin, carefully scratched ourselves out of the frame where we all were, and then going backwards, we reduced the size of the scratch outs until there was no more scratch out. Then going forward from that frame, we did the same thing, scratching out although we were no longer there, but in that case hiding the fact that we were no longer there, and then scratching out less and less and less. And it worked perfectly. So what you saw when you played it was, we all, you saw us assembling under the chandelier,
right?
And then standing still, and suddenly this weird scratching out would all like grow and envelop us, and then it would disappear again, and we were gone. So we did that same technique for phasing. We did have models of it was a Klingon battle cruiser and the Enterprise hung from black thread set against a black paper starry sky that was, of course, pinpricks in the black paper backlit with floodlights. And so they were able to have a phaser battle by yanking the string when one or the other of the ships had just been hit by a phaser blast or a photon torpedo, and then we would do, scratching the emulsion in order to have the photon torpedoes shoot from one to the other or phasers. So it was a lot of work, but we were in high school and this was important.
No, that's definitely the cool thing to do. Did you have uniforms?
Yes, absolutely had uniforms. Scott's mom was able to sew, and so she made uniforms for us all. And of course, we did lose a bunch of the red shirts, but that always happens.
And what was your role in this film, Steve?
Actually, I didn't appear on camera. I was behind the camera filming the whole thing.
Oh, I see. Okay, so you were the production department.
Yeah.
All right, very good, very good. I also have a Super 8 video from when my mom passed away years ago. We were cleaning out our house, and I opened up a box, and there was a bunch of Super 8 and slides, and I was like, I don't know what any of this stuff is. So I sent it off to one of those digitization companies, like where they send us everything in a box and they charge you whatever rate and they send you back a USB stick with everything on it. And I actually found a Super 8 that I am absolutely sure that I did when I was a kid of me playing with toys. And I had a Space 1999 Eagle, some Luke Skywalker action figures, and the saucer of the Enterprise. And I'm like, you could see my hand moving them around. Absolutely terrible. If I can find a link to that, I'll post it in the show notes, but absolutely crazy. So, do you collect anything Star Trek related, Steve?
No.
Mugs, caps, gloves?
No, I don't think I do. I guess my affinity for Star Trek is sort of intellectual. It's, as I said, not over the top, not costumes and attending conferences or trinkets and toys and things. I just wish we had more of that kind of quality television. And boy, I have high hopes for Strange New Worlds. It looks like a great new series. I've only at this point, while you and I are recording this, the second episode will be tomorrow. The first one was last week, and I have to tell you, I don't know what it is, but I guess I'm confessing, but I got choked up watching that in several places. It's just the strength of the dream that I had back when I was 11, and then with Next Generation, just the best of what Star Trek is. I get emotional because I love that idea so much.
Yeah, I got to say, I was really pleased when they announced the show. And part of it for me was that I always found the character of Pike, as seen in The Cage / The Menagerie, to be a very interesting captain. That you have this idea that there's this guy who's tired and he's sort of done with it as far as being a captain. And, he just wasn't into it at all anymore, and he was questioning his place in the universe. And I was actually very interested in that character to figure out, how did he get this way, what really happened on that last mission that he keeps referring to, where everything went sideways. And I just thought, man, I really want to see what goes on with this guy.
Well, and for me, what was interesting too is that Spock's loyalty to Pike superseded his to Kirk and the Federation. I mean, as I recall, he stole the Enterprise in order to honor Pike's need, and Kirk was not happy about that.
Oh, no, as you can imagine. I mean, who would be? Who would be? So I think we should probably talk about some episodes. Are you game?
Sure.
All right. Well, I had the M5 do some gentle internet sleuthing, and he recommended some episodes for us to talk about. Seems to me that you're in a very TOS, TNG frame of mind here, Steve, because the list of episodes that we have is very TOS, TNG focused, and but yet you told me that the Voyager is your favorite ship. So I'm going to interrogate you as to why there's no Voyager here on the list.
Okay, so I just think that the Voyager ship was sleek and beautifully designed as a ship standing separate from its crew and its adventures. Mm-hmm. I just like that ship. I think that was my favorite ship of the whole selection.
Okay, fair enough. Well, then let's jump in and talk about some episodes. Let's start with The Devil in the Dark. This is, of course, is the one with the Horta.
Yep.
That's the silicon-based life form. Its famous exhortation, "No kill I," and all of that. So everyone knows that this is a very popular episode of Star Trek, but I'm interested in why it speaks to you, Steve.
It was a first contact episode, and I think I am in love generally with first contact scenarios. I think they are really, really fascinating, and it's a question we all have in our lives, like, what would happen? What would that be like if like aliens actually existed? And I should tell you, it's a segue, but or a divergence, but I've always understood that I'm mortal and that I'm going to die. I've conducted my life in a way that I'm pleased with. I have a great wife. We're going to live out the rest of our lives. I don't have any problem with the idea of my death. I'm not religious, so I think that when I die, when my physical body dies, everything that is me ends. And I'm okay with that.
Okay.
My only complaint about ever having been here and being sentient and knowing about stars. I was a Boy Scout, and when we hiked in the Sierras, I would lay out under this unbelievable canopy of little bright lights, thinking there must be other entities. There's so much opportunity, so many chances. My only complaint of having been alive is that I will probably die without knowing. I am sci-fi through and through. It's what I read. I'm an avid reader. We're talking about Star Trek. That's been a huge part of my formation. It's not a regret, I guess, but it annoys me. The only thing that annoys me is that I'm not going to know. I will leave this mortal coil with that question unanswered.
So a couple things in response to that. First thing, which is I want to mention the episode, I believe it is First Contact, the TNG episode, where they actually go to a planet and initiate first contact. I don't know if you remember this one. They go down to the planet, and the episode is told from the perspective of the people on the planet. And they go down to the planet, and they're like, "We're from the Federation. We see you're about to launch a warp-capable ship, and we're here in friendship." And basically, the episode resolves, and they're like, "We're not ready for this. Please go away and don't come back." And they tell the Federation to get lost.
Pound salt, yeah.
Which, if you think about it, is probably, a pretty fair. You can understand why they would make that recommendation, right, at that particular point, and I believe, now I'm going on memory here, I did not look this up, but I seem to recall in my memory banks that there was actually a NASA or possibly government project outside of NASA, I'm not actually sure of the provenance of this, that what we should do if we got communications from an alien civilization, and in the carefully considered opinions of our best and brightest at the time, the advice was do not answer.
I agree. I think that the separation we have and the speed of light limitation that we may or may not ever be able to break, unclear. I think it's the best thing that ever happened, because we're unable to get along on this planet, and we're all humans. In fact, it was just recent that there was it was in the news again, and this may be what you're referring to, some group of scientists saying that we're going to go proactive and start transmitting something which, to announce ourselves.
No, I don't recall this.
It was just in the last couple of weeks, and I was thinking, I don't think that's a good idea. I love the nobility of the next generation and the essence of what Roddenberry originally created. I just read a series of books, the Bobaverse, where an individual human is transferred into a computer, and that process of being digitized then can be duplicated. So you can get lots of these Bobs.
Yes.
And they, for a reason they don't explain, there is like divergence among them when you don't get a perfect copy. You get a slight drift. And so what happens is there's a group of them that end up literally calling themselves the Federation because they object to the meddling with other alien cultures. They're like prime directive people. And so this idea that it would be a good idea for humans to mix with aliens, I love the concept, but in reality, I'm with the people who think we ought to just stay quiet. There's another novel by Michael McCullum called it's a trilogy, the Gibraltar trilogy. And in the Gibraltar trilogy, there is a race known as the Broa, and they are xenophobic. They are awesomely powerful. I mean, and a million stars worth of civilization. It turns out we're in the middle of this sphere, and somehow they haven't stumbled upon us yet. Yet they subjugate any alien race they encounter. And so it's an interesting, but again, it's one of these tales of like, aliens are not all ET who are gonna wave and think that Reese's Pieces are good.
Well, it sounds to me like there's a conflict or a tension here that you haven't quite resolved for me, Steve, because on one hand, you're saying you really want to know about the aliens. On the other half, you're saying, we shouldn't seek them out or try to find out about them. So tell me what's going on here, because it seems in conflict.
That is a very good point. Yes, I would like to know for sure, and I would like details, but I don't want them to know that we're here.
Okay. So we'll leave that unresolved, but I still need to know about the Horta and Devil in the Dark. So this particular episode, what about it speaks to you?
Everything about it. The first contact, the miners didn't realize that these little nodules that they were breaking were actually the eggs that the Horta was laying. The interaction with McCoy, Spock, and Kirk, all in so many episodes. That's good. This was fantastic. That famous line where the Horta has been damaged by phaser fire and is like gonna die, and so Kirk says, "Okay, McCoy, fix it," and McCoy says, "Fix what?" And Kirk says, "That." McCoy says, "Jim, it's quite literally made out of rock," and to which Kirk says something like, "You're a healer, Doctor. Heal it," and he, McCoy's all been out of shape and
I believe he says, "I'm a doctor, not a bricklayer."
Oh, yes, exactly. That was the line. Damn it, Jim, I'm a doctor, not a bricklayer. and then Kirk says, "You're a healer, heal it." And then so McCoy thinks about it for a while and then opens his communicator and tells him to beam down some silicon putty or something, whatever it is, that he's going to trowel into the wound of this thing. And anyway, so the first contact, the open-mindedness, I think, is one of the cool core features. Is we're coming into this situation with a sophisticated open-mindedness. We're not going to judge. We're going to see what's here and do good. And, what's not to love about that?
Yeah, I will say this, though. I think that Devil in the Dark is an episode in my mind which proves or is a good example of this idea that I've been thinking about quite a bit, which is that Gene gets a lot of credit for Star Trek, which he should get.
Yep.
But I think at times we overstate Gene Roddenberry's influence on Star Trek because so many of the key things in the show were made by the people around him. And as an example, I don't know if you know the backstory here,
no,
but the actor who played the Horta, He literally came into the office with basically a glorified carpet and said, "Hey, look at this cool alien thing I can do. Wouldn't this be awesome?" and showed, like, modeled what the Horta is, and it's a guy underneath a rug. And Gene Kuhn, who was working on the show, says, "That's awesome. I'm going to write an episode about that." And we get The Devil in the Dark, right?
Nice.
Which, again, it's using sort of the rules of the road that Gene Roddenberry set up. But I mean, when you look at like what Gene Kuhn did, what Dorothy Fontana did, what David Gerrold did, I mean, these other people really just took that stuff and ran with it. And this is an episode that I think really exemplifies that in my mind.
I was just gonna say, I think that's what you often get when you have really talented artists working with someone who's conceptual. The conceptual guy will say, okay, now we need, an alien swinging from a vine that has, this or that. And what they come back with is so much more than the guy who said it, ever expected to get.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a perfect example of that. So let's talk about a case where they came back with something that the powers that be did not want. Let's talk about The City on the Edge of Forever. So this is an episode which has quite a history behind it. And notably,
because of Harlan.
Yeah, because Harlan Ellison was definitely challenged in working with Gene. And there was certainly a lot of issues with the episode as Harlan originally wrote it, according to Gene. And Harlan had his own particular point of view on that. And eye to eye, they never saw, I think it is safe to say, now that they are both passed. And we ended up with this very interesting piece of sci-fi, which in my mind is probably one of the greatest pieces of sci-fi from the 60s, but I think in some ways is not a particularly good episode of Star Trek. So I'll just leave that hanging there and let you respond to that, and then we'll see where we want to go next.
I think I agree with you. We get, first of all, we get time travel. And time travel episodes have always been so popular that there is a DVD set of just Star Trek time travel episodes. I own it somewhere. And so that's always a people pleaser, is what you and then anything to deal with time travel. And I know that Voyager had a couple that were also a lot of fun. And of course, the Star Trek movie going back and dealing with the whales, The Voyage Home, was one of the best ever. So as pure sci-fi, the idea, and this is probably what you're referring to, of altering the timeline. I don't know, by that point, probably not in the original series. I mean, it's a constant theme now. I mean, we just had it with the second season of Picard, but that may have been the first time we were, as children, exposed to the idea that if you go back in time and you change something, that it could have astonishing repercussions. Now, the whole meme of a butterfly flapping its wings has like been expanded to this idea that like everything is constantly creating divergent opportunities for divergent realities. But that may have been, I mean, imagine watching that episode if that was the first time you've been exposed to the concept that you go back in time and you change something, look what happens. That just gives me goosebumps. So yeah, I get how it's great sci-fi. And of course, that scene at the end where Spock has like managed to get his tricorder to work by building this crazy contraption with tubes and Jacob's ladders and things.
Stone knives and bearskins.
Yes, exactly. And sees that what an influence Edith Keeler is on the future, and that and then finds her. What is it when your death is printed? I'm just
obituary.
Yes, thank you. And shows Jim definitively that she must die, yet he has been so, Kirk has fallen in love with her. And so then McCoy finally comes out of this, was it cortisone or not cortisone? It was something
Quatrazine.
Quatrazine or
I can't believe I remember all this stuff. Oh my gosh.
That's good. Hey, so Yosha Badidra Pashoyer Neros. So he finally comes out of that. The three of them are standing there on the curb when she's walking across the street, about to be hit. McCoy has the opportunity to save her, and Jim grabs him and prevents him from saving Edith. And McCoy says, Jim, do you realize what you've done? And Spock says, he knows, Doctor. He knows. Anyway, so human drama set in a sci-fi context. I love that one scene there, too.
Is it really a sci-fi context? I mean, they're just in 1930s New York.
Well, but yes, but it's a sci-fi context because he had to let her die to preserve the future. So anyway, I just again, a great episode, I thought.
Well, I think it does speak to something you brought up earlier, which is in that TNG Writer's Guide, which came out much later, of course, but I think this was true for TOS, is that it's about the characters, right? It's not about the spaceships or the pew-pew or any of that kind of stuff. That's really sort of incidental to telling the story, and putting it in that sci-fi setting sort of extracts from the story a lot of our preconceived notions about things, because you could just be like, well, they're in space, man. These aren't Democrats and Republicans or whatever. These are people in space, right? These right. Or these aren't the issues we're dealing with today. This is off in the future. That episode, Private Little War, that's not about Vietnam. That's about these space aliens, right?
Right.
All right. Well, then let's talk about a TNG episode. Let's talk about another fan favorite. Let's talk about Darmok with the wonderful Paul Winfield and the Children of Tama. Yep. Darmok and Jalad at Tanagra, Shaka when the walls fell. Yep. What in this particular episode speaks to you, Steve? Why is it special to you?
I love the idea that when we meet an alien race, there can be a problem larger than vocabulary. And so, I mean, it's a constant problem, right, in science fiction that everybody speaks English. It's like, and so you just sort of have to, I mean, and some science fiction does a good job of not having that happen. But most of it is just, that's too much to ask the listener to put up with, is like subtitles through the whole thing. So we just have the aliens speak English somehow, and we're going to forgive them.
Right.
So here, it's not the vocabulary. I mean, they're speaking words. We understand the phrases, but there's just this, still there's a problem with us understanding what's going on. And conveniently, I noted that their ship, most ships are not way more powerful than the Enterprise, but in this case, they can destroy us. So if they want to, we're history. So breaking this barrier of communication is crucial. So what do? Both of the leaders beam down and to work it out themselves. And we get this sense of the integrity. Again, this is why I get choked up, is like the ethics of the Star Trek ideal is there, that you've got well-intended leaders who are doing everything they can to bridge this communication barrier, and feeling, like really, really wanting to make that happen. And of course, they, spend a day or two talking to each other, frustrated, listening to each other, still unable to get it, until Picard realizes, oh, you communicate by reciting fables from your history. And then, of course, in this great tense moment at the very end, while this ship that conveniently is able to just nuke the Enterprise, on a whim, Picard gets back on board, knows how to communicate because he's learned it from their captain. Of course, they know that the captain got killed. They don't understand, they know their captain got killed. They don't understand the circumstances under which it happened. So they're about to take revenge on the Enterprise. And so Jean-Luc is there, and using his understanding that he gleaned from their leader, he's able to explain what happened. And we stave off disaster. Anyway, it just again, there was an hour of fantastic entertainment.
Well, I think it also taps into something that's a little bit more profound, which is that I think as humans, we are storytelling creatures. I mean, I think about when I see my oldest friend who lives across the country from me, and we don't get together all that often, but when we do, it's like half of the time we're together, it's like, we sit around and say, remember that time when this thing happened or that thing happened? Or, there's in-jokes I have with him where I could say words that would make no sense to you or any other person, but he'll know exactly what I'm talking about. And we will immediately commence on 15 minutes of laughing about that time. And no one else who was in the room would even understand the conversation that we're having. And you have this case where we meet these aliens, the children of Tama, and it's almost like to build a relationship with them, we must develop a shared story together, right? We have to have our own in-joke, as it were. And then from then we can move on, which I think that's profoundly human in so many ways. Which is one of the reasons I like the episode. And I think if people don't like the episode, I think they should go back and watch it again, because it is eminently wonderful and a delightful bit of Star Trek. All right. I want to ask you about another TNG episode. I want to ask you about Survivors. I have many thoughts on this episode. And I'm often conflicted about it, but I'm going to give you first crack at it, Steve. So what's going on here in Survivors, where we meet the Daoud, we meet Rashawn, and the episode that will be forever burned in my memory, where Worf says, "Good tea, nice house." So, so tell me what's going on here.
There was for those who don't remember the episode, there was a functioning, thriving, great planet of a human colony on, somewhere, and a member of an alien race known as the Daoud falls in love with a human woman, and just absolutely in love with her. They are spending time together, and a vicious alien race, the Husnak, blast the shit out of the planet. Just destroy all life on it. It's just devastated. And in the process, this woman who, as I recall, she was volunteering and was like being brave to the very end, and gets killed by the Husnak. Well, this Daoud, which is a super peace-loving, peaceful, benign alien, is driven mad briefly by his love for her and the heartless cruelty of the Husnak. And this Daoud is also incredibly powerful, and it removes the Husnak from existence just completely, and then wants to create the equivalent, what we would think of as a VR fantasy, wants to basically continue having his existence with her. So because of being this powerful, dare I say Q-like, he recreates the house and a green lawn and her, and they have a music box which plays music, and they dance, and basically he's continuing this virtual existence with her. Then the Enterprise flies in and looks at the fact that this colony has been eradicated from the surface, except I think it was Geordi who spots a little tiny patch of green in one location. And here, against all odds, apparently, is a surviving house with 2 occupants. Well, we come to learn that this isn't the case. The Deanna, the Daoud is worried that Deanna is going to see through this illusion, and so fills her mind with this music box melody in order to block her empathic abilities. Ultimately, the thing that pulls it all together for me is when the Enterprise is spoofed by the return of the Husnak ship several times, is led to believe that they're coming back, and draws the Enterprise off until finally Picard, being Picard, says, I don't think we're going to follow this wild goose again. and he comes to understand, to intuit what's going on. And in a scene on the Enterprise, it's been a while, so I don't remember the exact sequence of this, but the member of the Dowd says, in my grief, I struck out and I killed the Husnak. And Picard says, oh, well, okay. And I don't remember again how it was that Picard didn't convey his full understanding of this, and the Dowd said, Captain, you don't understand
the enormity of my crime.
He says something like
that. Yeah, he says something like that. Yeah,
I didn't kill some Husnak or those that attacked. He said, I killed them all. I killed all Husnak everywhere. Which and so we have several things happening. We have Picard appreciating for the first time. Yes, here we have another alien. Okay, fine, we get those all the time. Now we have one with that much power that it's able to, again, Q-like, to just eliminate a race from existence. And Picard says something like, we have no right or ability or scale or whatever. I don't, again, to be your judge. We can't judge you. And I remember him saying then to his bridge crew afterwards, I think we ought to just leave these people alone. We just don't, and I don't know if they put up a buoy or something to say, okay, just stay away from this planet. Just, leave this be. Don't go poking around.
Early on in Trek Profiles, I had a guest on, Tim Sandifer, a guy who's thought very deeply about Star Trek, and he also talked about this episode. So I want to hit you with his interpretation and let you respond to it, which is that in his point of view, and I hope I'm doing him justice here, he says that this was probably the biggest abrogation of duty that a Starfleet officer has ever had. It betrays the very principles of Star Trek, because here we have someone who admits to doing genocide.
Yes.
Killing the little Husnak babies in their little space cribs, right? And every other one that has ever existed, right? Including completely innocent little Husnak children. And he voluntarily places himself within our power, and we decide to let him go. It's offensive. It's absolutely antithetical to the concept of the Federation. It's an abrogation of justice. And it's a moral obscenity. Now that's and Tim, I think, used stronger language than that. And I will say it was probably one of the segments that people talk to me about when they've listened to all my episodes. They always want to talk about Tim and his response to this episode. So let me just lay that out there and have you respond to that.
I mean, I see his viewpoint. What was the name of the Dowd character?
Kevin Uxbridge.
Kevin, right? Kevin, because I can see her saying Kevin.
It was Kevin and Rashawn.
Right. I guess I was influenced by the actor and how passively he played his role. I mean, I felt empathy for him and the grief at his loss, but I also, I can't argue with your other guest's position that, yes, the non-military Husnak also ceased to exist. So it was a crime on a galactic scale.
Certainly something that's difficult to get your brain wrapped around, right? And I wish we could, and I didn't have a chance to look at the episode again, but I guess if I refreshed my memory of that interplay between Kevin and Jean-Luc. It was, to me, that was like the pinnacle of that episode, like where it was just goosebump worthy again. Just the idea of Picard realizing the power of the entity that he was standing in front of. Yeah, I again, just beautiful fiction. Yeah, no, it's beautifully written. It's beautifully acted, beautifully performed, right? The scene's very emotional. It's wonderful. But I think, and I hesitate to speak too much for my prior guest, but it seemed to me that the ethical issue got him really wrapped around the axle, and he was quite passionate about that for sure, which I understand. I mean, I get that way too sometimes about some of these episodes. So let me ask you about another one. Let me ask you about TNG's Inner Light, and I will set this one up controversially for you. Here we have a civilization that's facing collapse, and rather putting all of their efforts into trying to avert the collapse, they just say, look, we're all going to die, so we're just going to send out basically a time capsule and let that be all good. I think some people might take exception with that idea, but I'm curious as to what you think, Steve.
As I recall, the sun was increasing in strength, because I remember that that's right. That there was like some skin cream that they were using in order to, and wearing hats and like staying in the shade and out of the sun. So sun is increasing in strength, and I guess you could build lots of carports. I mean, I don't know what you do about that. You become a subterranean civilization. Probably wouldn't make such a great Star Trek episode. But for me, again, and this is why Jean-Luc was my favorite captain, the actor. I once had the opportunity to see him in person in Los Angeles. He used to do on stage, he would do A Christmas Carol.
I've seen it.
Oh.
I saw it in New York. Yeah.
And the guy is just gifted. And so here was a kind of a classic Jean-Luc, let's see what you got episode. Even during the closing credits, while, he's clutching this flute to his breast, looking out, and there are very few episodes where we are seeing from the outside of the Enterprise in through a window, and that's one of them. And with this flute music, of that tune that we heard him play so many times in the distance as the credits scroll. And, I'm just a sucker for Star Trek and for those sorts of moments. And what I loved was where they had pulled the probe in after he'd lived an entire life in the span of 15 minutes or however long he was under the influence of
15, 20 minutes, something like that. Yeah.
And Will comes in to his ready room and says, Captain, we pulled the probe in and opened it up, and we found something that, we thought you might want to have. And it was, the little box containing this instrument that he had learned to play. And just, what it meant to him. Oh, and also in the moment of him awakening from this. So here he was, like when this first happened to him, he refused to accept where he was, right? He was fighting that he was in this reality with this woman who was, believed someone he was who he wasn't,
right,
and giving him this soup to eat, and he was just like, he was pissed off for like quite a while, and but then of course over time that completely flipped, and he had 2 children and raised them, and his daughter was a scientist, and his son was, sort of pursuing an artistic and acting path, and he had friends that really meant a lot to him, and so he lives this life, and then at the end we see him and he's really old, right?
Yeah.
While they watch the rocket go up, and he realizes, oh, this is it. This is the probe. And then when he awakens on the floor of the bridge, and suddenly, like, this is literally a lifetime ago, and he's having to like remember their names. Oh, again, I that's why he's my favorite captain.
Well, yeah, in this case, it just sort of happened to him, right? He was sort of selected by the probe, and it just kind of happened to him. The acting was certainly very special in that episode. Yeah, I would agree with you. And I think it's just a very, very powerful episode about the life not lived, because he always sort of put that family stuff aside, right? That's Robert's thing. I'm this great starship captain, and this is what I do, and I'm married to my career and all that. And
well, of course, Picard season 2 was a lot about that too, sort of getting resolution to that whole issue.
Yeah, of course. I still can't get my brain wrapped around how Robert and Renee died in a fire in the 24th century. I can't figure that out. I'm not sure. I'm not sure that makes a lick of sense to me. But at a certain point, you just got to press the "I believe" button and move on, right?
Yeah. I mean, we have obviously pressed it a long time ago. Hook, line, and sinker. Here we are talking about it with great passion. Something that's entirely a creation of our imagination.
That's right. That's right. So we didn't talk about Star Trek Discovery at all. What was your reaction to that?
I wanted to love it. I think it wasn't, to coin a phrase in Ars Technica talking about Strange New Worlds, it wasn't our father's Star Trek. It just seemed like a frenetic video game. It seemed like, I mean, it was just, maybe I'm too old for an excuse to have, computer graphics overload. I don't know. I just could not get through it. And so it's like, well, okay, this isn't my Star Trek. Strange New Worlds, however, to me, it looks like maybe Star Trek is back.
Have you checked out Lower Decks or Prodigy at all?
No. I think I saw one episode of Lower Decks, but never pursued it. And also the fact that it's just not as readily available. I now am resubscribed to Paramount Plus for a year, thanks to Strange New World. So we will be watching. I think I'll take Lori through Voyager and then probably, spend some time on these other Star Trek properties that I just haven't had access to mostly.
I think you'll really enjoy Prodigy myself. That's my recommendation. It has really a lot of that Star Trek flavor that I think you like. And also, Lower Decks has so many references to so many obscure Star Trek things that I think you'll really appreciate it, right? As you get deep into it. I mean,
is Prodigy animated?
Yeah.
I thought it was, yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's meant for a younger age demographic, but I can tell you, I really love it. I really
You're
enjoy
proud
it.
to say. You're proud to say. Yeah.
Oh, hey, look, there's any kind of Star Trek that people love. You come on the show, like it's all good.
Yep.
Whatever you like is fine with me. The one episode of Lower Decks I would recommend for you is Wesdu, which is it's a Klingon name,
of course.
and it's 3 ships is what it means. And they follow the Lower Decks crew, meaning like the lowest ranking crew members, on 3 different ships, a Klingon ship, a Vulcan ship, and our Federation ship in the same episode. As like their ships are doing this like story that like our characters don't really have access to, and they're kind of doing their Lower Decks thing. It's so good. It's so good.
Very cool.
It's my favorite episode of Lower Decks. So I would encourage you to check that one out. So, Steve, you've got a long history with Star Trek. You're one of the viewers of the original series during original broadcast. You've spent hours making a Star Trek film in high school and painstakingly scratching out the celluloid to do transporter effects. You've watched hours upon hours of Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, Enterprise, and Discovery, and now Strange New Worlds. You agreed to talk to me, some rando from the internet who sent you a DM on Twitter. Star Trek must obviously be something that is meaningful to you. Why does Star Trek matter to you?
2 things. First, it's science fiction, and there's just not enough science fiction. I'm so glad that there's some Edge of Tomorrow, Oblivion, the Tom Hanks movies. He's done a bunch of good sci-fi, but we're in a science fiction drought. And it's why I go to books. The good news is I love to read. And so, there's an awful lot of science fiction, which real science fiction addicts, and I guess I am, have access to. It's not on the screen. It's not as popular. Some of it is dark and some of that, and that's sort of interesting too, or really weird. So first, it is science fiction. Mm-hmm. And so again, and so for me, it's not only Star Trek. We talked about Star Wars and Lost in Space, and I love the Lost in Space, remakes. I thought those were also very good with the ever annoying Dr. Smith. And I think Smith was annoying in the same way that Q was annoying. I just don't like flies in the ointment, I guess. Although I recognize they're a powerful plot device. So first, it's science fiction. But then what chokes me up is the ethics. To me, corny as some might feel it is, the Picard ethic. This is what we do. This is what we are. We stand for something. We like primary colors. We're we're the good guys. I think that's what it is. And corny, okay, but that's me. And so I think that's what it is. It's good science fiction.
Well, Steve, I've enjoyed our conversation, but the M5 is signaling me that it is now time for the Kobayashi Maru.
Uh-oh.
The Kobayashi Maru is a challenging and difficult test, cunningly prepared by the M5. Should you not only survive the test, but pass it as well, the M5 will award you an honorary Star Trek title on behalf of our little program. Are you ready, Steve?
I don't know that I am, but the Kobayashi Maru is named for a reason, so I'll hope.
All right, M5, load the Kobayashi Maru simulation and prepare to record Steve's responses.
Kobayashi Maru simulator ready.
Choose your TOS shuttlecraft, Columbus, Einstein, Galileo, or the Copernicus.
Galileo.
Which planet should we revisit? Gamma Trianguli 6 or Sigma Draconis 6?
Oh, Sigma Draconis 6, for sure.
Which of these spots on the Enterprise would be your favorite? The Shuttle Bay Observation Platform, the Officer's Lounge, the Arboretum, or the Rec Room?
Officer's Lounge, I think.
Choose your off-brand TNG Starfleet engineer. McDougal, Argyle, Logan, or Leland T. Lynch?
Definitely McDougal. She was great.
Which of these aliens are the worst? The Vidians, the Charon, or the Kobali?
I would say the Kobali.
Sounds great. Simulation complete. M5, please compute the results and tell us if our guest has passed the Kobayashi Maru.
Analyzing.
Steve, I am pleased to tell you that the M5 has calculated that you have passed the Kobayashi Maru simulation. Congratulations.
Oh, thank goodness.
And now, the M5, who has analyzed your answers, will award you an honorary Star Trek title on behalf of our podcast. M5, what title shall we award our guest?
Steve Gibson is awarded the title of Deep Core Multitronic Programmer at the Daystrom Institute.
So there you go.
I'll accept the position. Thank you.
Steve, please tell people how they can get in touch with you, where they can follow you, and where they can keep up with all your goings-on.
Actually, I'm available on Twitter. That's where most people find me. It's where you and I found each other. I'm at SGGRC, which are, my initials, Steve Gibson, and then my company, Gibson Research Corporation. So at SGGRC. And as my co-podcast host on Security Now podcast always reminds people, my DMs are open, so you do not need to be following me in order to send me a DM, or I don't need to be following you. I guess that's the way it works. Yep. So I accept DMs, and that's, and I do keep up with my Twitter feed.
And you're regretting that now that you're on my show, that I sent you a DM invite. Steve, thank you so much for being part of Trek Profiles.
Absolutely my pleasure.
Here ends this installment of the Trek Profiles podcast. And before we offer a Trek quote to close this episode, I'd like to remind you that you may send us your kind and carefully considered comments, your resentful rejoinders of retaliation, or selfie videos of yourself doing that hot new Horta dance craze workout routine to feedback@trekprofiles.com or on Facebook or Twitter @TrekProfiles. Anything you send us may be used in the show, or it may be deleted from all existence by an enraged Daoud. This time, I leave you with a quote from Eileen, who in the episode The Inner Light said, quote, "Now we live in you. Tell them of us, my darling." Close quote. Thanks for listening, and live long and prosper.
This handcrafted podcast is brought to you by Stars and Sky Media Lab. It's cosmic.
Hi, everybody. Your humble host here. I must give you some prep for this first piece of bonus content. So you've listened, hopefully, by now to the episode, and you've heard Steve tell his story of the Super 8 movie and the Bun-Ons and how he had to record it backwards to get a alien sound. So just for funsies, I decided to take that clip out of the episode and reverse the audio for you so you can hear exactly how bizarre it sounded. Again, the message, it's supposed to be, we are the Bun-Ons, surrender your ship or be destroyed. I didn't do any special processing on this clip except reverse it. So without any further ado, here it is.
Surrender your ship or be destroyed.
If you can you start a local recording via whatever method you prefer?
I don't have any way to do that on this machine. Unfortunately, my podcasting system is normally using Zoom or Skype, but I don't have any local recording.
You don't have like the built-in Windows audio recorder?
Oh, well, I probably have that.
Is that a Windows 10 machine you're using?
Yeah.
Then it has Windows. There's a Windows voice recorder that's built in.
Oh, and that'll record this, huh? Okay.
Yeah, it should.
Okay, you see how much I use this for other things.
It's really just my own insanity, Steve. I prefer to be belt and suspenders with this kind of stuff. Squadcast has been incredibly reliable for me. But I always like to just.
I certainly appreciate that. There were several podcasts I did with Leo where after we were all done, he looked down and he said, "Oh, I forgot to press record." So now 17 years later, I still give him a little jab about that. I said, Leo, did you press the big red record button?
All right. Well, I got to say, Steve, it's a thrill to be able to talk to you because I've been a listener of your Security Now show since single-digit episodes in real time. I mean, Strider Honey Monkeys was the day. You know, I followed you through all your various relationships you've referenced here and there. Your trios in the fridge, which only like very deep cut old school listeners would remember. Your trios in the fridge.
All my various sci-fi discoveries over the years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I have taken advantage of some of those. I really enjoyed The Martian. The book I enjoyed way more than the movie. The movie was good, but the book was way better.
Yeah. So often the case.
So I called you a security analyst. I don't know if that's quite right. Is that the right title for you? Would you call yourself a security analyst or a security commentator?
Yeah, I think really this whole security thing is a sideline for me. I was born to code. And so it's, before computers existed, because I was, I'm old now. I was teaching electronics in high school, and it was hardware. And then when mini computers first happened, I just fell in love with software, and I've just been coding ever since. So what happened was, it was because my company that was a software publishing company got on the internet when Bill Gates was pushing MSN, the Microsoft network. That was when we had CompuServe and people were using dial-up modems. The internet was just beginning to happen. So we got an ISDN line to have our network, our office network on the internet. And something caused me to poke around the IP address space near the one that had been assigned to my company, and there were other people's C drives showing. And it was like, oh my God. And so actually that was the creation of what I named Shields Up, which is probably the first clue that I have a little bit of a Star Trek fancy and
absolutely
background. But that guy, it was the realization that other people's C drives it's hard to imagine today, but back then, literally, they're in all of their personal and private data was just out on the internet for people. You could literally map their drive to your computer and browse around in it with Windows Explorer the way you do your own local C drive. It was nuts. And so Shields Up was created to allow people to see whether their computers were visible from the public internet, which could be done from my web server outside on the public internet. And of course, again, shields up thanks to Star Trek. And I even had nanoprobes at one point.
Right. So, but I feel like we lost the thread there. Do you call yourself a security analyst or a security commentator? What's the right term? I should have checked with you before we began.
Yeah. I guess a security analyst. I certainly have focused on, for the last 18 years of the Security Now podcast, focused on issues of internet security and privacy and, malware and ransomware and what can go wrong and sort of that whole space.
Very good, Steve. So you should know that after each episode drops, I tweet these out as Twitter polls. And then I tag you in that, and you can choose to engage with my listeners or not,
nice.
as you choose. Yeah. And so I begin every episode with a recap of like a previous episode's Kobayashi Maru questions and what the poll responses were. So if you didn't remember, Gamma Trianguli 6 was the feeders of Vol.
Yeah.
If you remember that one, right? And Sigma Dracona 6, that was the Morg and I-Morg, the givers of pain and delight.
Right.
And all that. Yeah. And I always loved how in TNG they had like a new engineer of the week, like in season 1. Right? And they just kept, like, they had McDougal, who came and went in an episode. We never saw her again. And No, Logan, who was like a jerk. I was glad he was gone. And that guy who only referred to himself like with his full name and title, Chief Engineer Leland T. Lynch here. I was like, dude, you're a jerk. I hate you. Do you remember who the Kobali were? Do you remember them?
The name I remember, but I don't remember who.
These were from Voyager. And these were the aliens who reproduced by finding people who were dead or near death and then injecting them with a virus, and that would turn them into their offspring. And so they had a dead Starfleet officer that got found and got rejuvenated by them and turned into an alien. And then she shows back up on Voyager. Oh, it was like,
wow.
Oh yeah, I was like,
we're going to have fun watching Voyager. That's going to be really good.
You're going to remember that when the Kobali comes up. You're going to be like, oh, I remember those guys.
Oh, you know what I completely forgot to talk about was Stargate, my other absolute favorite, again, as sci-fi. And it relates to
which Stargate? Which Stargate? There's like 5 of them.
It relates to Star Trek because what's fun, the way I compare those two, in Star Trek, you fly a ship to somewhere alien, and then you have interactions and stuff happens. In Stargate, well, you have this existing wormhole technology, and so you take a gate to some other location, and then you deal with whatever you find there. So a very different sort of vehicle, but yeah, I've loved all of the Stargates.
Oh, I started watching it with Atlantis. I think was the first one I actually saw. I saw the original movie, with James Spader, and I didn't watch the one that had, what's his name? MacGyver, the guy who played MacGyver.
Yeah.
Richard. Oh, God.
And I totally know who you mean. And I love him, by the way.
Yeah, you know who I'm talking about. But anyway, the first one I started watching was Stargate Atlantis. So I was watching it out of order, and I was like, oh, I don't know if this is a problem or not.
And Atlantis was a little odd. I mean, it was not my favorite. I think the original Stargate series, and I've also liked the movies, too.
Yeah, they were grand. I really enjoyed it. I mean, one of these days I'm going to go back and try to watch them all.
Yeah.
But I feel like, we didn't talk about this on the show, but I feel like I would challenge you on the idea that we're in a sci-fi drought. I feel like there's so much sci-fi right now.
Yeah.
There's a lot, but I mean, it all started with the remake of Battlestar Galactica. We got The Expanse.
The Expanse, I was just going to say, it was a great series. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's so much stuff. Like, people will come up to me and they're like, are you watching this show? And I'm like, what show? And then like, I'm like, I haven't even heard of that show,
Yeah.
My friend is trying to get me to watch some show that's already been canceled called Dark Matters or Dark Matter. It's something.
And there was something where stuff was dropping from the sky a year or two ago. Like an alien craft had blown up in orbit, and bits and pieces of its tech were falling to the ground, and it was actually good too.
Oh gosh, I don't even remember which one that one was, but there's so much. There's so much. So there we go. Boom diggity, we're done. Was that okay for you? Was that what you were expecting?
It was great, and I am delighted that I learned about Squadcast. It's a win.
Yeah, it's a really great platform. So I have the package that has video for chat, but like I don't have the package where I can save the video. So it's just as soon as I hit stop, the video is gone. It's not saved. And that's my original Spock art. So that's actually from Leonard Nimoy's shop. His family runs a shop called Shop LLAP. That's his family's business.
Huh.
And that's every version of Spock from the original series, like in every costume and every outfit, hand painted. Those from an artist in Spain. So that's
cool.
Yeah, it's a cool background. And I tell you, man, it was just a thrill having you on because I've listened to your show since the beginning days. So
it's absolutely my pleasure, my friend. Thank you.